When my stepmom told me to make room for the real kids and threw my suitcase onto the porch, I thought my heart couldn't break any more than it already had. I was wrong. Stay with me through this story, and if it reaches your heart, don't forget to show some love by liking, subscribing, or sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Callie Monroe. I'm 19, a freshman in college, and for as long as I can remember, I've tried to keep peace in a house that never really felt like mine. My mom passed away when I was 12, and it was just Dad and me for a few quiet years. Then he met Vanessa, a woman who always looked perfect, talked perfect, and made sure everyone knew she ran the house. She came with 2 kids, Tyler, 16, and Sophie, 12. At first, I tried to get along. I wanted Dad to be happy again. But Vanessa's smile always had an edge to it. She would say things like, "Oh, you're still here? Or you're not used to sharing, are you?" I brushed it off, telling myself she'd come around. She never did. Slowly, she started changing things. My pictures came down, my mom's dishes disappeared from the cabinet, and even my bedroom started to look like it wasn't mine anymore. When Thanksgiving came around, I was excited to go home. I thought maybe the holiday spirit would make things better. I was wrong again. The moment I walked through the door, I could feel the tension. Vanessa barely looked at me, and Dad was quiet, like he always was when she was around. Dinner felt forced, every bite heavy with silence. After we ate, Vanessa asked me to come upstairs. I followed her, confused, and that's when I saw it, boxes stacked in my room, my things shoved to the corner. She said, "We need your room for Sophie now. You're in college, you can't expect to keep it forever." I stood there frozen, trying to process her words. Then she smirked and said, "You should make room for the real kids." Before I could even respond, she tossed my suitcase toward the door, and it hit the floor with a thud. I looked at my dad, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just stood there, eyes on the ground. That silence, it cut deeper than her words. I packed what little I could fit into that one duffel bag. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. No home, no family, just me and my heartbreak. That was the night I stopped being family. And though I didn't know it then, it was also the night I started becoming someone stronger. I ended up on my best friend Lila's couch with one suitcase and a pillow that smelled faintly like home. She didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a blanket and said, "Stay as long as you need." That kindness nearly broke me, because it reminded me of what love was supposed to feel like, soft, not sharp. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to pretend I was fine. I picked up extra shifts at the little diner near campus, taking the late-night ones nobody wanted. The pay wasn't great, but it covered my bus rides, a few groceries, and a share of Lila's rent. Between work and classes, my life became a blur of exhaustion. Still, it was better than hearing Vanessa's voice echo in my head. At night, when the apartment was quiet, the memories came back. Her sneer, the sound of the suitcase hitting the floor, the look on Dad's face. All of it replayed like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Some nights I cried quietly, pressing my face into the pillow so Lila wouldn't hear. Other nights, I just stared at the ceiling, anger burning where the sadness used to be. One afternoon, while waiting for my next class, I made the mistake of opening Facebook. The first thing I saw was Vanessa's post, a smiling picture of her, Dad, Tyler, and Sophie at the Thanksgiving table, my spot empty. The caption read, "So thankful for my beautiful family." I stared at it for a long time, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. Not sadness this time. Something harder. That photo made me promise myself one thing. I'd never need them again. Not for money, not for support, not even for love. I'd make my own way, no matter how small or slow the start. So I worked harder. I took double shifts during finals week, served coffee with fake smiles, and studied during my breaks. Lila would joke that I was turning into a robot, but she also knew I needed to stay busy to keep from falling apart. She'd make pancakes for us on Sunday mornings and talk about the future like it was still bright. I wanted to believe her. There were moments, small ones, when I felt proud of myself. Like the first time I paid my phone bill without help, or when my professor praised my essay. They were tiny wins, but they were mine. Still, sometimes, when the diner lights dimmed and the place emptied out, I'd catch myself glancing at families sitting together, laughing, and I'd feel that familiar ache. But then I'd remind myself that I was free from the cold stares, from walking on eggshells, from begging for love I'd never get. It wasn't much of a life yet, but it was mine, and that was enough to keep going. It had been a few months since I left home, and by then I'd gotten used to my new routine: school, work, sleep, repeat. I didn't talk to my dad or anyone from that house, but news had a funny way of finding me. One slow afternoon at the diner, a regular customer mentioned Monroe Hardware, my dad's store. "Heard business isn't doing so well," she said, shaking her head. I froze, coffee pot in hand. It was the first time I'd heard anything about them in months. Later that week, another customer who used to work there came in and said Vanessa had been spending too much, remodeling the store to make it look modern. Apparently, it wasn't going well. My dad's name was still on the business, but Vanessa was the one making decisions now. The thought made my stomach twist. She always wanted control. Now she had it. Then came more whispers. Tyler, her golden boy, had gotten into some kind of legal trouble. Something about shoplifting with his friends and posting a video online. Sophie, who used to follow Vanessa around like a shadow, was acting out too, skipping classes, talking back. The perfect family, image Vanessa loved to show off, was starting to fall apart. When I first heard all this, I tried to act like I didn't care. I told Lila, "It's none of my business." But deep down, a small part of me felt satisfied. It was wrong, maybe, but it felt like the universe was finally balancing things out. For months, I'd been holding on to the pain of that night, her words, Dad's silence. And now, hearing that their perfect little life was cracking, it almost felt like justice. Still, I tried not to dwell on it. I didn't want to be that bitter person who wished bad things on others. But late at night, when I thought about Vanessa's smug smile or that picture of them at the Thanksgiving table, I couldn't help but think, maybe she deserves this. One night, while I was folding laundry in the small apartment, I told Lila what I'd heard. She just smiled that knowing smile of hers and said, "Sometimes karma just takes her time." Her voice was calm, almost comforting. It made me realize that maybe I didn't have to chase revenge. Life had its own way of serving it. Still, part of me couldn't stop wondering what my dad was going through. Was he still letting her run everything? Was he even okay? I shook the thoughts away. He made his choice when he stayed silent. I went to bed that night with mixed feelings: guilt for feeling glad, pain for still caring. Maybe that's what healing looked like, learning to live with both. Either way, I knew one thing: their fall wasn't my responsibility. But it sure felt like the start of something shifting. It was a Thursday night after my diner shift, and I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone started ringing. The number wasn't saved, but it looked familiar somehow. I almost ignored it, thinking it might be a telemarketer, but something made me swipe to answer. "Hello," I said, tired. There was a pause, and then a voice I hadn't heard in months, sharp, shaky, and completely out of place in my tiny apartment. "Callie, it's Vanessa." For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. I hadn't expected to ever hear her voice again, not after what she did. My chest tightened. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my tone colder than I meant it to be. She didn't waste time pretending to be polite. Her voice cracked as she said, "Your dad's sick. He had a stroke. The doctor said it was mild, but he's weak and confused. I don't know what to do." I stood there frozen, my fork clattering onto the counter. 100 memories rushed back, her face, her voice saying, "Make room for the real kids," my dad's silence. Now she wanted my help? Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell her I wasn't her problem anymore. But then she said softly, "He keeps asking for you." That did it. My heart twisted in a way I couldn't control. For everything that had happened, he was still my dad. The man who used to make pancakes shaped like hearts when I was little. The man who sang off-key while driving me to school. I hated him for not standing up for me, but I couldn't erase those memories. I swallowed hard. "Is he in the hospital?" "Yes," she said quickly. "County General. I can't handle the bills or the store by myself. Please, Callie, just come see him. He needs you." Her voice broke at the end, and I realized how desperate she sounded. Nothing like the confident woman who used to make me feel small. I didn't say yes right away. I just stared at the wall, feeling a storm of emotions I couldn't name. "I'll come," I finally said, though every part of me was screaming not to. "But only to see him." "Thank you," she whispered, relief flooding her voice. After hanging up, I stood there in silence. My food was cold, my hands shaking. Lila looked up from the couch, concern written on her face. "Who is that?" she asked. "Vanessa," I said quietly. "Dad's in the hospital." She frowned. "Are you gonna go?" I nodded slowly. "Just once." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying her words, my dad's name, and that awful day she threw me out. I didn't know what waited for me back there, but one thing was certain: walking into that house again would hurt. Still, I couldn't ignore him. Not this time. The drive back to my dad's house felt longer than it should have. Every mile made my chest tighter. When I finally pulled up the familiar driveway, the house looked smaller, duller, like time had taken the shine right out of it. The garden Mom used to care for was overgrown, and the paint on the porch was peeling. It didn't look like home anymore. Vanessa opened the door before I could even knock. For a second, we just stared at each other. She looked different, pale, tired, her perfect hair tied back in a messy bun. "Callie," she said softly, almost like she was afraid of me. "Thank you for coming." I didn't hug her. I just nodded and stepped inside. The air felt heavy, like the walls still remembered everything that had happened. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on his phone, but he didn't meet my eyes. Sophie sat beside him, fidgeting with her bracelet. "Hey," I said quietly. She just mumbled something without looking up. It was awkward. All of us pretending to be strangers who used to share the same roof. Vanessa tried to fill the silence with small talk, offering me tea, asking about school, her voice too sweet to sound real. I could tell she was walking on eggshells, trying to act kind now that she needed something. At the hospital, I found Dad sitting up in bed, thinner and older than I remembered. His hands trembled when he saw me. "Callie," he whispered, eyes watering. "I didn't think you'd come." I wanted to be angry, but seeing him like that, hooked up to wires and looking so weak, broke me a little. I sat beside him, and he reached for my hand. "I should have stopped her," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought keeping peace was better than standing up. I was wrong." I didn't know what to say. The apology I'd wanted for months finally came, but it didn't feel like enough. Still, I squeezed his hand and said, "Just focus on getting better." After visiting hours ended, I went back to the house and started looking through the bills and paperwork scattered on the counter. Vanessa had been crying earlier, saying she didn't know how to keep up with everything. I believed her. The place was a mess. The store's finances were tangled, the credit card statements full of charges that didn't make sense. There were overdraft fees, late payments, even notices from suppliers threatening to stop deliveries. As I flipped through the files, the truth hit me hard. Monroe Hardware was barely surviving. Vanessa had been spending money like it would never run out, and Dad, probably too tired or trusting, had let her. I sat there for a long time, staring at the numbers. This house, the one that erased me, was falling apart from the inside, and somehow I was the only one left who could fix it. The days after Dad's stroke felt strange. I spent my mornings between the hospital and the store, trying to keep things from falling apart. Vanessa, suddenly all sweetness and smiles, followed me around like we were best friends. She offered me coffee, asked about school, even suggested we have girl talks. Every word felt fake. The woman who once threw me out was now pretending we had a bond. I played along. I nodded when she spoke, smiled when I had to, and listened carefully to every little thing she said. It didn't take long for her real motives to show. One night, while she was making tea, she said casually, "Callie, you're so good with money and numbers. Maybe you could help me fix a few things at the store. Your dad would want that." That's when I knew she needed something. People like Vanessa never change unless they're desperate. So, I started helping, or at least that's what she thought. I went through the files, the bank accounts, the receipts. The more I dug, the more the picture became clear. Vanessa had been moving money out of Dad's business accounts into another account under her name. She'd taken out business expenses that looked suspiciously like spa trips, home decor, and luxury clothes. She wasn't just careless, she was stealing. One file hit me hardest. A note written in her handwriting said, "Daniel approved this expense." I knew he didn't. She had forged his signature. When I confronted her casually about the missing money, she sighed dramatically and said, "Your father, he just wasn't good at managing things. He made mistakes. I tried to fix them, but it all got too much." I looked at her and realized she was blaming him for everything. The same man lying in a hospital bed, who still blamed himself for not standing up to her. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "I see," I said softly. "Maybe I can help fix it." She smiled, clearly thinking she still had me under control. Later that evening, she brought out some papers. "The bank won't approve the business loan unless someone co-signs it," she said. "It's just a small loan, to save your father's store. You could help him by signing it with me." I took the papers and pretended to look them over. "I'll think about it," I said, folding them neatly. I just want to make sure it's the right move. She reached out, touching my hand lightly. You've really grown up, Callie. Your dad would be proud. I smiled back, but inside I was already planning. I wasn't going to co-sign anything. I was going to find proof of everything she'd done, and make sure she could never hurt my dad again. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless one anymore. I was the quiet storm she never saw coming. Most nights, I stayed late at the hardware store after everyone went home. The place smelled like dust and old wood, and the hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound keeping me company. I told Vanessa I was organizing inventory, but in truth, I was digging. Every drawer, every folder, every file cabinet, I went through them all. At first, it was small things that didn't add up. Invoices with the same handwriting but different signatures, bills marked paid, with no receipt, suppliers I'd never heard of. Then I found a stack of printouts in an old filing box, tucked behind old receipts. They showed large transfers, thousands of dollars, leaving the business account and landing in one under Vanessa's name. Each one labeled temporary move or consulting fee. My stomach turned. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Vanessa hadn't just been careless. She had been draining the business for months, maybe years. She funneled company money into her own account while pretending to struggle. I took pictures of everything with my phone, bank transfers, her forged notes, fake invoices. I stored them in a hidden folder, just in case. One night, while I was working late again, Lila stopped by with coffee. She took one look at me surrounded by papers and said, "You're not organizing, are you?" I hesitated, then told her everything. She didn't even blink, just nodded like she'd been waiting for me to finally say it. "You need someone who knows what they're doing," she said. "Let's talk to a lawyer, just to understand what you've got here." We met with one of Lila's family friends, a quiet, older man who'd handled business law for decades. I laid out the papers and explained the transfers. He studied everything carefully, then looked up at me and said, "This is clear embezzlement. If what you're showing me is accurate, she could face criminal charges, serious ones." Hearing those words hit hard. I'd always known Vanessa was manipulative, but knowing she'd been stealing from my father, the man she claimed to love, made my blood run cold. Still, I didn't feel pity anymore. I felt focus. The lawyer advised me to keep gathering quietly, to make sure the evidence was airtight. So that's what I did. For days, I went through her emails, saved copies of messages she thought she deleted, and collected every false document she'd created. Piece by piece, I built a case strong enough to crush her lies. And somewhere between the sleepless nights and the quiet victories, something changed. I wasn't scared of her anymore. Every secret file I uncovered gave me back a little bit of the power she'd taken from me. By the time I finished, I knew one thing for sure. Vanessa Monroe's empire of lies was about to collapse. And this time, I was the one holding the match. I waited until the store was empty before I called her in. Vanessa walked in with her usual fake smile, holding a coffee cup like she had nothing to hide. "You wanted to talk?" she asked, her voice trying to sound casual. I nodded and closed the office door behind her. The sound of the lock clicking made her glance up, uneasy. I spread the papers across the desk, printouts, bank statements, emails. Her name was on every one of them. "We're going to," I said quietly. "About this." At first, she didn't understand. She tilted her head, that same patronizing look she always gave me when I was a kid. But then her eyes fell on the numbers, the dates, the account transfers. I watched her face drain of color. "What is this?" she whispered. "You tell me," I said, folding my arms. "All these transfers from the business account to your personal one. Fake invoices. False signatures. You've been stealing from Dad's company, Vanessa." Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the papers. I was just borrowing the money," she stammered. "The business was struggling. I planned to pay it back." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe she still thought I was that naive. "You drained everything and blamed him for it. Don't lie to me." Her voice broke as she said, "Callie, please, you don't understand. I was scared. Your father trusted you more than me. You were always his little girl, and I thought you'd take him away from me. That made me stop. Not out of sympathy, but disbelief." "Take him from you?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You already did." Tears streamed down her face. For once, there was no arrogance, no control. Just guilt. "Please, Callie," she begged, reaching for my hand. "Let me fix this. I'll make it right. Just don't ruin my life." I pulled my hand back and pointed to the papers. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over control of the store to Dad. You'll leave quietly, no drama, no excuses. If you don't, I'll take this evidence to the police. And trust me, they'll love the part about you forging his signature." She looked at me like she couldn't believe I was serious. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Try me," I said. My voice was calm, steady. I meant every word. Silence filled the room. The ticking of the old wall clock was the only sound between us. Finally, she nodded weakly. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll sign." I watched her scribble her name on the papers, the same hand that once threw my suitcase onto the porch. When she was done, she looked up at me broken. I didn't feel victory, just peace. I had the truth now, and for once, she couldn't twist it. The next morning, the house was quiet, too quiet. No clinking dishes, no perfume in the hallway, no voice calling from the kitchen. I walked downstairs and noticed the envelope on the dining table, sitting next to a silver wedding ring. My stomach tightened as I opened it. The note was short. "I'm sorry. Tell Daniel I couldn't face him. I'll make it easier for everyone if I leave." No signature, but it didn't need one. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the words. After all the chaos, the lies, the pretending, Vanessa was gone. Not with a fight, not with drama, just gone. The silence she left behind felt strange, almost hollow. Later that day, I went to the hospital and told Dad. His hands shook when I handed him the note. He read it twice, then sank back against the pillow, eyes closed. "She left?" he asked softly, his voice filled with disbelief. I nodded. "She signed over the store, Dad." "It's ours again." "Well, yours." He was quiet for a while. Then tears formed in his eyes, and he whispered, "I let her do too much. I thought keeping peace was love. I was a fool." I reached for his hand. "You were trying to keep a family together," I said gently. "You just picked the wrong person to fight for." He squeezed my hand weakly. "You didn't have to fix my mess, Callie, but you did. Thank you." When I came back to the house that evening, Tyler and Sophie were waiting in the living room. Tyler looked older somehow, guilt written all over his face. Sophie sat beside him, eyes red from crying. "Callie," Tyler started, his voice low. "We didn't know what she was doing. I mean, we knew she was strict, but we didn't know about the money or how bad things were." Sophie nodded. "I'm sorry she treated you like that," she whispered. "It wasn't fair." I didn't know what to say. They were just kids caught in her mess, the same way I'd been caught in my father's silence. "It's okay," I said softly. "We can all do better now." After they went upstairs, I walked to my old room. The door creaked when I opened it. It was empty, just 4 bare walls and the faint marks where my posters used to hang. For a second, it felt like stepping back in time, to that night when my suitcase sat on the porch. But this time, the space didn't feel cold or cruel. It felt mine. I sat on the floor, letting the quiet fill me. There was so much to rebuild. The store, my dad's health, maybe even this broken family. But I wasn't scared anymore. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and opened the door for business. The place was dusty, half empty, but standing behind that counter, I felt something new, peace. For the first time in years, I belonged exactly where I was. The months that followed were slow but steady. The store, once on the edge of collapse, started breathing again. The shelves were stocked, customers began returning, and the familiar sound of the cash register clicking open became a rhythm I didn't realize I'd missed. Daniel's health improved too. He wasn't as strong as before, but every morning he sat near the counter with his coffee, greeting the regulars with a quiet smile. For the first time in years, the Monroe hardware sign outside didn't just represent my dad's business. It represented survival. My survival. I managed the store now, handling orders, training staff, and balancing the books with a precision I'd learned through pain. Each task I completed felt like a step further away from that night my suitcase hit the porch. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Lila still stopped by sometimes with sandwiches from the diner, teasing me for being the boss lady. Dad called her our guardian angel, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. I was finally proud of what I'd rebuilt. Then, one quiet afternoon, as I was restocking the paint aisle, I heard the bell above the door ring. I turned around, expecting a customer, but froze. It was Vanessa. She looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes held that hollow look of someone who'd been running from life for too long. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Callie," she said softly, almost as if testing whether she was allowed to say my name. "I heard the store's doing well." I I was wondering if you had any job openings. Just something small. I can help clean, or do the books, or... Her voice cracked, and I could see the tears building. I stood still, letting her words hang in the air. There was a time when I would have begged for her approval, for a scrap of kindness. But that version of me was gone. I looked her in the eyes and said quietly, "Sorry, we're full. We're making room for the real people who care." Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She nodded once, then turned and walked out. The bell above the door jingled softly as it closed behind her, leaving only silence and the faint scent of dust and paint. I exhaled, realizing my hands weren't shaking. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just peace. She'd taken so much from me once, but she couldn't take this moment. Later that evening, I locked up the store and stood outside, looking at the glowing sign one more time. The sky was streaked with orange, and the wind felt warm against my face. I smiled to myself. Revenge wasn't about watching someone fall. It was about standing tall after they tried to break you. And in that quiet, golden hour, I knew I had finally won. Do you think Callie made the right choice by turning Vanessa away, or should she have given her a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if stories like this speak to your heart, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.